Brooke, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm actually just a PT student. I go to Regis University. I'm currently in my last year right now. I do really want to work in the emergency department. My husband and I are moving back to California after we graduate. The hospitals that I'm looking at, I'm not sure if an ED program's established yet. So just kind of wanted to sit in and listen and see some anticipated barriers that I could maybe address before starting.
Love that. Addie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Addie. I'm a PT in Wisconsin. I'm in the emergency department. Been down there for like 2 years now. I'm actually like almost full time down there now, which is exciting. Um, but yeah, otherwise I've been doing acute care for like 6 years.
Genevieve, how about you?
Hi, I'm Jen. I've been in the ED for 4 years now, but I've been practicing for many years, over 20. And yeah, and I'm the full-time ED PT at University of Maryland.
Awesome. I didn't know they had an ED program there. That's great.
Yep.
So normally, if you haven't been before, we do a journal club once a quarter, and we usually talk about a specific article or a specific area of practice. I think last time we did vestibular assessment and the new Grace 3 guidelines for dizziness. We've also done some on geriatric assessment, discharge to home, things like that. But what I wanted to do today was just hear from you all about what barriers you're facing in the ED and see if there's a way that I can help you find the literature that you need to support what barriers you're having in your practice to sort of help problem solve how to bust those barriers for you. And also today we released a podcast with Addie about some barriers that she's had in the ED and kind of ways that she's problem solved that. So tell me what barriers you're having and how can I help?
I guess for me, I've come a long way. I've been there 4 years, and all the attendings, they know that I'm there. They're very grateful. They're very thankful that I'm there. Um, but I can do a lot more than what they think I can do. And I've offered like to give in services to all the residents so they know for all the not only ED attendings, because we work with all the teams, trauma and neuro and medicine. And so I've kind of offered, but I feel like they need to be more aware because I just had a medicine attending say, "Oh, well, I didn't know that you did vestibular." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." He goes, "Since when?" I'm like, "Since always."
Since forever.
Yeah. So,
For 20
I don't know.
years.
Exactly.
I think
So,
that's a super common problem. And I think it sort of mirrors society at large, right? Like that most people don't know what physical therapists do, including our healthcare partners who should. But I think part of the issue with that is physicians in the emergency department or APPs, they don't get a lot of exposure to physical therapy in their training because it's not an area we've typically been in. So orthopedic surgeons, they kind of know what we do. Neurologists, they know what we do. Physiatrists, they have a pretty good idea. Still, I feel like we have to educate those different providers. Um, Geriatricians usually have a good idea, pediatricians, but emergency medical providers, like it's not like when you think emergency medicine, you don't think rehab services, like they don't usually go hand in hand. So I find that the kind of push to educate them in our full scope is hard. So what I'm hearing you saying is that you're having a hard time practicing at the top of your scope.
yes, but I will have to say I've come a long way
Love it.
where I am so busy. So busy. Like, at first, I wasn't as busy, and it took a long time to get that way, but now I am really busy, and also, like, I made a lot of gains with the nurse practitioners because we have a
Mhm.
fast track program, that's all your walkie-talkie that come in, so I do a lot of low back. I have a that's where I made the most progress because I am an inpatient therapist, I can do that, but I also do a lot of outpatient stuff, so I go outpatient a lot as well. So that's where I feel I made a big difference, because now if we have any low back pain or any mobility issues that come through fast track, they're like, oh, we had to call Jen. So I feel like I have made a big difference. I just feel like we could probably do more to justify having more FTE positions.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you're ready to grow.
Yes, I would like, yes.
And I'm also curious as to how you're managing this as a one-woman show.
And that is hard because they want, I have a poster that's coming up that I'm going to present on Friday to the medical center, and it's
Love
just
it.
a lot. Yeah, it's a lot.
Well, and so if you're not there, what happens?
So if I'm not there, there is some PRN coverage that comes down, or so it's managed by outpatient, or the
Got it.
outpatient therapists come. On the weekends, it's managed by the inpatient therapists.
Okay. And do you
So
find that you have good staff consistency with that, or skill set consistency?
neither. Everybody
Yeah.
hates going to the ED. Everybody hates it. I don't know why, because I really like it, but they don't.
Right? I don't know. I think it takes like this special kind of unicorn physical therapist.
I
But I
think so.
usually describe it like Fight Club. Like, we're Brad Pitt and they're Edward Norton, and it is what it is. And all the Edward Norton series like secretly want to be Brad Pitt.
Yeah. Yep.
They've
I
got a
think so.
little Brad Pitt in them. They just haven't tapped into it yet. So
Yeah.
the big problems that you're going to have with growing are that you don't have anyone that wants to help you grow.
Right.
And also, if you're going to expand your scope, it's hard if there's not consistency. So what'll happen is if all of a sudden your providers are like, yeah, vestibular, let's go. And then somebody comes in and they're like, oh, I'm not comfortable with that.
Right.
Or I can't see that patient. I don't do vestibular. Like,
Yes.
that's where you will run into problems, because if your whole staff can't do it, then really none of your staff can do it. Right. So
Right.
that becomes a big barrier. But you also don't want to go the direction of, please only consult me for these 5 diagnoses, right?
Right.
Because the goal is less diagnosis based and more impact based. Which patients can I impact the most? And sometimes that might not be somebody with low back pain. It might be somebody who fell. And sometimes it might be that person with low back pain is going to have the biggest impact. So I caution people from saying, well, please only call me for these things.
Right.
But it's hard to expand when you don't have the resources to do so.
Right.
So I feel like you've got a multi-pronged problem: decreased resources, decreased understanding on the medical team part, and a culture issue. And
Right.
you can't shift the culture effectively without the right resources.
Although I will say I get a lot of students and they all love it.
Yes.
They love they wanna, like, I have one I just had, she'd love to do it, but then we don't have the position, but
Yeah.
all my students love it.
So tell me more about your trying to do training for the residents and the staff. What's happening there?
So they're very protective. So every Wednesday, all the ED residents, they have like in services they go to for whatever. And I've been trying to get into that, but they're very protective. So
They are.
and I haven't been able to get into that. So I did email the director. She's awesome, but I just think I need to just keep badgering people. I think that's really what I just need to keep doing to get somewhere, so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, so I have done that. I've done what the physical therapist wants you to know about low back pain, differential diagnosis of dizziness, other staff members also, because that marketing will come from other members of the staff. So I've done considerations for nursing staff for patients with common neurologic disorders, like positioning, guarding, things to be aware of. So that they're like, oh gosh, I have this person with Parkinson's. I need to look for these 5 things to see if they're safe, that type of thing. So I've done some of that. Also done a lot of training with the staff that would be responsible if you aren't there. So like, who's walking that patient to the bathroom and road testing them to make sure they're okay to go home? So in many facilities, that's a paramedic, it's an EMT, it's a CNA, it's a nurse. So targeting that area as well is another good way. The other strategies that you can use are evidence-based strategies. So one thing that I'll do is I'll take an article with me and I'll round on all of the pods of physicians, and I'll just bring multiple copies of that. And I'll say, hey, like, have you seen the new Grace 3 guidelines? Here's how physical therapy can help you with dizziness, and kind of explaining what my training is, how I can take work from them and handle
Right.
it for them,
Yes.
and show them that that is evidence-based. And then same thing for like falls. Some people for some reason can't get any consults for falls, but they can get
No,
lots of
I get
consults
all
for
of them.
back pain.
I
Yeah,
get all of
so
them.
you know, taking literature about discharge planning is also very helpful. Early access to physical therapy for low back pain reduces opioid use, costs to the medical system, decreases imaging. Taking those articles around with you and sharing them with the medical team, obviously not when they're like super slammed, but
Right.
being able to educate them. The other thing that I will do sometimes is if I have a vestibular patient, I will take a resident with me and teach them while I'm doing it. So I will say to the attending, do you have a learner that can come with me and help me be an extra set of hands? Sometimes those attendings are excited to let their resident learn. Sometimes they're excited to have somebody not ask them questions for a little while. And you can take the resident, you can take the intern, and then you can educate them while you educate the patient and while you're doing that as well. So those are some ways that you can kind of get more of that buy-in. Other silly things I have done, like physical therapy month is coming up. So I'll make like a half sheet that says when to call the physical therapist or the physical therapist scope of practice. And I'll be like, hey, it's physical therapy month. What did you get me for PT month? This is what I got you. This is everything I can do for you. This is how I can help your patients. And it just kind of sparks an interesting discussion. I had one physician say, how come I had to find out you were a doctor on Twitter? I'm like, well, we all are. Every PT that works here is actually, let's talk about that. So I think kind of doing
That's
that
a great idea. I will do
would
that.
help you, especially because you're in a unique position that because it's just you,
Yeah.
you have that face recognition, you have that like 4
They all
years
know
of
me.
solid work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you could just be like, hey, you know, we've worked together for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I have a secret to share with you. It turns out I have all of these other skills that I've been hiding from you, and I am ready to go. Let's go.
That is awesome. I'm
It-
going to do that. Thank you.
yeah. And like saying to them explicitly things like, did you know
Yeah.
that I can do this? The other thing is I will look at like the track board. Do you use Epic?
Yep.
I'll
We
look
have
at the
track
track board and I'll
That's what
see
I do.
like it'll say, I don't know,
Dizziness.
headache or
Vertigo.
migraine.
Yeah.
And I'll go over and I'll say, hey, what do you think about this patient in room 32? And they're like, oh, I didn't consult you for that patient. And I'll say, I know, but I was taking a look, and did you know that physical therapists can actually make a big difference with migraine? And here's how. And being able to open that conversation and attach it to a specific patient and saying, hey, do you mind if I give it a shot?
Yeah.
Because what's the harm? Like
Yeah, I
physical
do
therapy is not a harm. It's probably not going to slow them down. The evidence would show that it actually will reduce the amount of time, reduce unnecessary medical work, and reduce bounce back. So, hey, let me take a run at this patient. Let me take this off your hands for a little while. Here's what I have to
Yes.
offer.
That's how I got into doing all the low back pains, is because that is what
Yes.
I do. Is I go, but now I'm finding, I don't know how when with your Epic, but I have like all the inpatient, because we have and I'm sure everybody does, but like all the borders, there's
Yeah.
a whole
Bedlock.
lot of inpatient stuff. So I get a lot, of course, I get a lot of referrals for them, but then that takes away a lot of my time for like the ED patients.
Jen,
You know
it's
what I
time
mean?
to grow. It is time to grow. That's
I
all
know.
that is.
Because I am swamped. Like I get
Time to grow.
over 10 consults a day. So
It's time
yeah.
to grow.
Yeah, I need help.
And even if you just pitch that to your inpatient staff and say,
Mhm.
hey, I need an inpatient therapist to come manage this caseload, because there are 2 caseloads in this zone. And if we
Yeah.
can get these patients in the ED that are boarding, that will help with our bedlock issue, which will help expedite discharge, decrease harm to the patient. Because when
Yeah.
I see these patients boarding, I think, like, I'll look and they're like 87 years old and they're here for a
Yep.
UTI, or they're here for weakness or failure to thrive. And now they're not going to get evaluated for 3 days while they wait for a bed.
Right.
That's
Right.
harm. I mean, I
Yeah.
truly believe that that's harm because the ED nursing staff does not have time to mobilize those patients. There are
No.
not shared bathrooms. There's a lack of durable medical equipment. There's a lack of people who are trained to facilitate safe mobility. They might get a PureWick, they might get a catheter, things that aren't necessarily needed. Also, if you think about the environment, there's no windows. The lights
Right.
are on all day. It's like being in Las Vegas.
Yep.
Like overstimulating, confusing, delirium is going to go through the roof. So that is like definitely a case you can make to the rehab department, the emergency department, the hospital administrators. We will evaluate these patients sooner and start getting their discharge plans going and make mobility recommendations. And that is a great way to start getting a second person into the ED. And then once you have that second person, if either of you are slow, you can support the other person, and then you can really expand what you're offering. And then hopefully when your bedlock alleviates, you still have enough work for two people.
Right. Right.
Because
That's
where I practice, we're up to 3 full-time PTs in the ED every day. One just for the fast track, one
okay.
just for the main ED and observation unit, and one just for the bedlock.
Wow.
And we all support each other. So
Yes.
that work gets done and it moves. And the emergency department really is the gateway to your health system.
Who is your who are you under, inpatient or outpatient? Who are you under?
So most ED practices are housed under their inpatient cost center. So
Yeah.
it really depends like on how easily you can maneuver that based on your cost center. I have yet to find an ED practice that is housed under the ED cost center.
Right.
I've not yet found that. Some of the good with that is when they cut the ED budget, it doesn't impact you.
Right.
So that's one good thing. But some of the bad things are if they cut the rehab department budget, it does impact you. Or if you're not meeting rehab department productivity, that also impacts
Mhm.
you. Most emergency departments would like you to sit there like a respiratory therapist who's waiting to intubate somebody. They want you waiting right there for a patient to come in. They don't want to have to find you. They don't want you floating to other
Right.
units. But if you're under a rehab center cost center, you can't do that because productivity is life, right?
Yep.
So I have yet to figure out what the best solution to that is, but I almost wonder in your case if it might be great to have one outpatient FTE and one
Yeah.
inpatient FTE because you're already covering it on the weekends with an inpatient FTE.
Yes.
And
Yes.
these are inpatients.
Yeah.
The ones that are boarding
Yes.
and the
The
ones that aren't are outpatients.
And I don't know if any of you guys struggle with this, but our inpatient PT staff took a big hit. A lot of people left for various reasons, and I don't know if this is across the nation, but they were really down where there's no way they could ever help me.
Yeah.
Now we've hired a bunch of new grads, so maybe we might be getting there, but I
And
don't
you
know if
shall
other
mold them in your image.
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to. But so that's another yeah. So I don't know, but I guess I'll just talk with the supervisor too, like my supervisor, and just kinda to see where she's at too, because, I don't know, but that's a good point. And it would be nice. I don't know, it'd be because I am by myself. Which I love what I do, and I'm in with a bunch of pharmacists who I love.
I love that. They're another critical part of the ED team.
They're great. Oh my goodness, they're great. And I also go over to the peds ED. I haven't been to the psych ED, and I don't really want to, I'll be honest.
So I actually think there's a big role for PT in the psych ED intermittently. I think
Yeah.
there's a larger role for occupational therapy in the psych
Yeah.
ED.
Yes.
And when I find myself there, it's because of this travesty in the US healthcare system where you can have a physical impairment or you can have a mental impairment, but you're not allowed to have both at the same time.
Yeah.
So
And I don't know
you can't go to mental health rehab if you're not functionally independent, but you can't go to physical rehab if you're not mentally stable.
right. And you can't have an assistive device either if to go to the psych ED.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that is where I find myself there a lot. Unfortunately, or I'll have a patient who might have tried to harm themselves or end their life and just injured or debilitated themselves in the process. And now they're kind of stuck in like hospital purgatory because
Yep.
they need a walker, or they have a spine brace, or they have a brain injury, and they're just not really safe to go, but a rehab facility also won't take them. So Brooke, maybe your big business idea as a new grad could be to create a rehab facility that handles both things, because that does not exist as far as I can tell.
I was wondering, I don't know if this is a dumb question, why are patients not allowed to have an assistive device if they're in the psych ED?
It's considered a weapon.
It can be, yep. And I have had a couple instances where I've been able to get a patient to a facility with a wheelchair or a walker, but not a cane, for example. It just depends on the facility. But either way, they need to be at least modified independent. They can't need any hands-on assistance.
Yep.
Which is really hard. So then we're shuffling and trying to figure out where the best place for that patient to be is.
Yeah. Then they usually get admitted. That's how we do it. They go admitted to
Yep.
the psych floor.
And
is
then
how
they rehab in place.
Yep.
Yep. Which is not an excellent use of the healthcare system.
No.
If I were in charge, I would just blow everything up and start again. But unfortunately, nobody asked my opinion. So here we are. And we'll continue to do the best we can with what we have. Jen, I think you've got a lot of really good things going for you. You have rapport, you have the skill set, you have the experience, you clearly have the right attitude. You're like totally, I'm sure, unflappable in an emergency. And you have the ability to like mentor a whole team of ED PTs.
Yes, I would
You
love
just
to.
need the ability and the permission to do so. So I think the next step for you is probably a business case to show what the needs are. And if those needs match the needs of the hospital, I think you'd be probably able to get the green light for a pilot program to add that second PT.
Yeah. I just don't know how to do it, you know?
I
That's the
do
only
know.
thing. Huh?
I do
like,
know. Yep.
oh, business? Oh, great.
Yeah. And I think that that's sometimes the hardest part. And the biggest key I can give you like right now is that you have to solve other people's problems, not yours.
Right.
Like your problem is you're super busy, you have more to offer, and there's too much work to do and too many competing demands for you to actually practice at the top of your scope.
Right. Right.
They don't care about that. So that's
Nope.
not anybody's problem but your problem, and frankly the patient's problem.
Yep.
So we need to figure out how to make it the hospital's problem. So the hospital has a problem with bedlock.
Yep.
So that's thing
Huge.
number one that I would put on there. They've got a problem with bedlock. They also probably have an issue, and I'm not targeting your facility specifically because I don't know, with patient satisfaction, because patient satisfaction in the emergency department is always low.
Yes.
So being able to add patient satisfaction is also good. Your providers are probably also a little burned out and overworked. And if you could be the right provider at the right time and take some of that work away from them, for example, in our super track, by having a PT there all the time, that takes pressure off the nurse practitioners and the physician assistants, because the triage people will be like, PT only. And then we don't need to get them involved. So that's a whole patient they now didn't have to manage. So that can improve your workflow as well. So being able to kind of demonstrate those benefits, I think is really helpful. And the last piece that I would add, because you don't have a problem with rapport or like the culture of adding a PT or like being a PT, you just need more resources, is that I would definitely recommend that you keep track of how many patients you're not able to see that you should have seen. And that'll be a soft track, because as far as I can tell, there's no way in Epic to do that. But if you're managing the track board and you're looking kind of, I would say like maybe look at set times during the day if you can. These are patients I should have seen. These are patients I could have seen. That will help kind of justify that a little bit.
Okay.
To show, or you could also look like, choose a couple of patients that are inpatient status that are stuck and take down those MRNs and track them and see how long it took that patient to get a PT eval.
Okay, yeah.
Like, was that 48 hours later? Was that 36 hours later? Was it a day? Just so you have a sense when you're going to make this pitch, like, you know, this patient's with all these comorbidities and an AMPAC of whatever, sat in the ED for 3 days until they got to the floor, and then they got evaluated.
Right. Right. That's a good.
So kind of soft tracking that to see like where you're getting to, I think would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I will keep track of. That's good. And then I can present that and we'll see what happens. But thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, there was totally another thing I was gonna say too, but it's like it is department because I also
It's,
have an emergency department brain.
I understand.
And it comes, it goes.
Yep. And it
But
doesn't get any better.
yeah, somebody said I was having a conversation about mom brain. And
Yeah.
for those of you who don't have kids, I apologize for this side, but like there was this like when you are pregnant that like you lose your mind and you can't remember anything. And then people were like, it doesn't get better. It's never the same. But I don't think that's actually the case. I think the issue is not that your memory gets worse. Your memory capacity actually
So many
expands
things in here.
exponentially. Because instead of having to manage just myself or just
Yeah.
myself and my spouse, I now have to manage myself, my spouse, and my 3 children. And so
Yeah.
my working memory has actually expanded tremendously. And my brain's ability to prioritize what was worth remembering has also expanded tremendously. And working in the ED, how many patient details do you have to carry with you until you have time to write it down?
Yeah.
So I think we need to reframe that. And mom brain is actually incredible. It's just
Yes.
frustrating sometimes because it doesn't work at the pace we need it to.
I agree.
So Addie, I know you had some similar issues kind of to Jen, where you were like trying to get consulted for the things that you felt like you could add value to. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, not really, because I'm still dealing with the same thing. But I almost was I don't know, I kind of feel for you. I'm on the other end of the spectrum where like we I'm not busy enough. And like our observation unit is like, so the ED is on the first floor and our observation unit is on the fourth floor. So like you can't, I'm not assigned to both of those, but if I know it's weird. Like it's mostly just because of the distance between the two, where it's
Yep.
like you'd have to run up and down constantly. And then also like I feel like our observation unit is always full. So, and they always want PT to see these people almost every day. So then because what we ended up running into is if I was covering both, then the people on the observation unit wouldn't get seen because I was seeing someone in the ED. And then they were like, well, where do we put this person? Like, because they wanted a note like every day or something. So we ended up moving, like, now I get like 2 to 4 people on the floor a day, and then the rest of the day they just have me sit in the ER.
So
Um,
I had the same thing as you. Our
mhm.
OBS was on the 3rd floor, far away from the ED, and it was horrible. And it wasn't really an OBS. It was just this unit that they called OBS, but like inpatients were there. It was a nightmare. I hated it. I just hated it. And I've always been an inpatient therapist. I'm trying to I'm now more outpatient, but I'm a little burnt out on the inpatient side, a little, a lot. And so I couldn't stand it because it was just the people that they couldn't get to go anywhere. They had to wait for whatever the reason before they went to subacute or, SNF or inpatient rehab, and they would go there. I eventually, then I did that, but that wasn't keeping me busy enough, and the ED definitely wasn't keeping me busy enough. So then I'm like, okay, well, I gotta get productivity somewhere. So then I'm like, well, let me take some outpatients. So then about a year ago, I was doing outpatients, I was doing OBS, I was doing ED, and now finally, I pretty much told my supervisor, I'm like, look it. This OBS is not OBS. It's just not. It's inpatient and it's terrible. It's just a terrible unit, and it was. And so
Purgatory.
it is, and I'm
Yeah.
like, it's basically a medicine unit. That's what it is. And so I begged them to, I can't be a part of that. Let me do outpatients where I know I can get productivity because they come in, and then let me do the ED. So they agreed to that. And so now I do 2 hours in the morning of outpatient. And that's for my sanity. I need a little bit of that. I
Just a
appreciate
little bit of structure.
just a little, and to have nice conversations with patients. Not that I don't get that in the ED, I do, but sometimes, with, how the ED can be, some of them can be rather challenging to work with.
Yeah.
So I do 2 hours of that, and then I go down the ED for the rest of my day. And, some days it's such a great day. It's usually great. If I recently had a vestibular patient. I don't get as many as you'd think, but I think I'm getting more now because awareness is getting out there. And like between my low backs, the vestibular, and that immediate, you see it immediately when they can't walk in, but then they walk out and they just think you're a
Mhm.
miracle worker. It is the
Yes.
absolute best in the world. And that's what I love. So all I'd say to you is that 2 years you've been in the ED.
Yeah.
So it'll come. It will come. Because 2 years and it was still a little slow, but once you just keep working, you just keep being there. I think you just being there and you're the face for PT. And I'm telling you, in 2 years, you're gonna be like, oh my God, I'm so busy. I need help. So it's gonna come, I promise.
That's the goal. Like, I feel like right now, like when I have to call for help, it's because I got like the other day I walked into a room and then I walked out and there were 4 more orders out at the same time. And I was like, that's
Yep.
great. However, I cannot be in 4 places at the same time. And then they all kind of like fight over who,
Yeah.
and then I just kind of triage myself and call someone for help and
Yes.
try my best. But
Well, and the secret to that, when you get 4 at a time, is that you choose the one that is going to free up the resources the fastest.
Mhm.
Which of these patients, if I see right now, will leave that room faster. Like if that patient's going to OBS anyway,
Yeah.
they're going down the list. If that patient could leave without imaging, if I get in there right now, that one's first. Because the goal, especially if you have bedlock, is free up a room while taking pressure off your team and increasing patient satisfaction and providing amazing quality care that only a physical therapist can provide. So that's how I would suggest like managing that part. Like you don't have to let the providers fight over it. I just tell them, I'm sorry, I need to see a patient over here first because they're more likely to discharge sooner.
Yep.
Most providers are okay with that too, because if you think about it, that holds a bed in their zone, which gives them a chance to catch up a little too. So some providers are like, we got to get this patient out. Like we just got to move. And I know some hospital systems providers are paid based on their turnaround time, which is crazy that healthcare works like that. But sometimes you'll get pushback because of that. Other places pay their providers based on their outcomes. So it really depends on kind of what motivations there are behind what's pressuring people to move patients. Sometimes it's the charge nurse that's like, we got to move patients, we got to move them. If you're not coming now, that patient's going to OBS. If you're not coming now, we're sending that patient home. So there's so many factors about the ED that it's also good to understand the situation each day when you go down there. How full is it? Are other hospitals near us on divert? Are we over capacity? How many are we holding? Like our ED has over 100 beds, and some days I'll go in and we're holding 40 people. That's 40% of our capacity is gone. So I know if somebody's ambulatory, they're probably not staying for PT because they can't. Like we cannot do that. That's not sometimes the best use of resources because of the capacity issues that we're having. So they're doing their own level of triage. So understanding those factors will help you make those decisions as well.
That makes sense. Yeah, this is crazy to think like we are not boarding an RED at all anymore. Like which is like great, right? Like no one
Go
wants that.
Wisconsin.
Yes, like I don't know what's going on here, but like I would say the past few weeks, like it's like rare for our track board to have more than like 30 people on it. And I'm like, I feel like part of my problem is there's literally not enough people to see that have PT problems. But then, man, I feel bad. You're just like, man, we are so short-staffed on the inpatient side. We're overstaffed on the inpatient side. So
Come to
I'm
Maryland.
like, yeah, I should just go
Come
over
on.
there for a month or so and help you out. Cause like I'm like running into like, okay, great. I've like finally got to this point where they're letting me sit down there, but I don't have enough to do. And then I try to float to the floor and I don't have enough to do either. And then I'm like, oh, like how do you hit productivity then? It's just,
And
it,
it's like that. Every ED has
Yeah.
cycles. But the course that I taught last week in Boston, every single person in there, their hospital is still boarding,
wow.
even in Canada.
Blessed.
So I don't know what you're doing in Wisconsin, but apparently all that cheese and beer is really keeping people out of the ED.
Yeah, I maybe just wait until football kicks off a bit more. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Because that was my favorite part of visiting Wisconsin. So obviously that is like keeping people in tip-top shape and out of the ED. I don't know. I didn't
I didn't think so either.
until I went to Wisconsin. I was like, this is amazing. All this cheese. So
It is
good.
pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was great. I had cannoli in Boston.
Oh,
I'm
that's
gonna
good.
start choosing where I teach classes based on what kind of food they have.
Boston's pretty great.
Boston is pretty great. It's expensive
Yes.
though. It's
Very
expensive.
well. It's expensive here too. And I just got back from Vegas, and it's expensive there as well.
Colorado is now being referred to as California East, so I think we're not in great shape either. What other questions or barriers are you experiencing? Addie, I can't help you with not enough patience. I mean, you could go out and start hitting people with your car lightly or like asking people to move heavy things.
I've had people offer to go push people over, and I'm like, no, we're not at that
Ice.
point.
It's
Yeah,
almost
that's
ice
coming.
season.
That's coming. So
Yeah. I find that ice storms, either you get tons of business from that or nothing. People are either staying in or they're going out and doing crazy things. There's nothing in between.
I bet in Wisconsin they're doing crazy things because I'm from New York and we get the ice and they're doing crazy things up there. But down here, they're like, no, I won't go outside.
Yeah. In a couple weeks, we're gonna have a podcast with PT who works in a ski mountain ED.
Wow.
And so it's kind of a seasonal job, and they just spend the entire day pulling people off the mountain and patching them up. So that's what we do in Colorado. We put people on slippery things and push them down mountains, and we hope for the best.
Oh man. So on the weekends, do you guys have someone that also just sits in the ED?
No,
So
we do not.
During the week, we run 3 PTs every day and 1 OT. On the weekends, we run 1 PT and 1 OT.
Okay. The weekends are a struggle with us because obviously we're shorter staffed on the inpatient side. Like we always do that on the weekends. And so like we don't have someone sitting down there.
Yeah.
But then since we don't have, basically like when I work the weekends, I carry the phone, but like that's it. So like it's basically like if they think that I exist, then they'll call, versus like normally I'm like either sitting down there or I'm at least like nudging on secure chat. But I can't do that on the weekend because like if I get like 5 ED orders, then my floor patients are pushed, which like I could triage, but like usually it's a little stressful to sit there and be like, oh, I went from like 9 evals to 13, and then you gotta pick. But
yeah, and I think that the issue that you'll run into with that is that when your weekday practice becomes really consistent, then you're going to have a dedicated person on the weekends as well, because the ED is not going to understand why there aren't enough people on the weekend, because there are no differentiation in days there. We staff the ED on Christmas and Thanksgiving now also, because there's not a day when there is not a PT in the ED, because we've had that much of a culture shift and that much of a demand, and that that's just like how the practice works. So it'd be like saying, oh, there's just not a respiratory therapist there today. Like that's not acceptable because of the benefits to the patient. So I think that the other thing to remember on the weekends when you are prioritizing patients is that everybody in the ED is discharge pending. So when we triage on the weekends, it's like discharge pending, discharge pending, discharge pending patients are seen first, but everyone in the ED is discharge pending. That's why they're calling you.
Exactly.
So once you get so consistent during the weekdays, that's the next step for growth before you add a second human, is that you are consistent 7 days a week. So step 1 is consistent 5 days a week. Step 2 is consistent 7 days a week. Then step 3 is we got to grow. And Jen needs to step 3.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you guys inpatient? Your inpatients, are they also, because our inpatients work all holidays? Yours as well. Yeah.
Yep.
So
Christmas
Yeah.
and Thanksgiving super light. Like there's one or two PTs for the whole hospital and one for the ED kind of thing. Same with Thanksgiving. But other holidays are stuff like a regular weekend kind of.
okay.
Everybody gets a holiday.
Yep.
We used to
And
have to work one summer holiday and one winter holiday, and that was kind of how that worked. But now we have so many therapists because our hospital is so big that you just have to choose one, and then you know which holiday you'll be working for the next 6 years.
oh,
Because it
nice.
kind of goes in a rotation. Yeah, so you can plan ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Not so much for us. I can't even plan next summer's vacation.
Yeah, oh no, summer's totally a different animal.
Okay.
You know you might not be working a holiday, but you still don't know if you can get any time off.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's hard. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What other issues are you having? What other needs do you have?
That was my biggest, is like, I think I just need more help. And like, I just got done having a student, which is great. I love having students. And I just took 2 weeks off. So it's been, right now it's great.
You feel
Um,
amazing.
I feel so good. I feel so good. But then I helped out the school so I had a student. So when I go back, I'm going to get another student, which it's fine. I really do like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can be challenging depending on the student, but for the most part, I've had great students. So, but that's the hard part. The hard part is I want to do the best by the student, but I also need to do other stuff. And it's kind of hard to do everything I need to do, be a good mentor, and then treat patients, and then try to grow a program. I don't know. It's challenging. That's
The
all.
other thing I want you to consider is the way that you know you have a successful, thriving practice is if you quit tomorrow, will it continue without you? Or will it be dead
Well,
in the
we're gonna
water?
find out, me coming back after just 2 weeks, because I know they were all struggling and scared. So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll
So
see.
that's also kind of future direction, is building a bench and building a team of people that can successfully practice for you. That's how you know the culture has shifted, both in the rehab department and the emergency department, that staffing that is a priority, that there are people in training, that there's a plan for when you're not there, that there's somebody that can back you up. But thank you for taking students in the ED, because it is hard, and it is the best way to make sure that we still have people practicing in the ED 10 years from
Mhm.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
And
they
it
all
shows them what top of scope looks like.
Yes. Yes, and they've all had great experiences. I mean, I think I'm doing okay. I got CI of the year, so that's kinda cool.
What?
So, but yeah,
Brooke, it sounds like you need to go out to Maryland for your
come on
last
over.
clinical.
Yeah, so we'll see. Well, this is definitely helpful, and I think I'm gonna sit down with my supervisor and just figure out how we can make it grow more. And I'm definitely I can't wait I'm gonna create something for the attendings and to let them know all the services I can provide. So that's a great idea, and I love that it's
Brief.
Yep.
Super brief. The other, I remembered what I was going to say. It's
Good.
back. Okay, two
Okay.
things.
Yes.
First, if you want, when you're ready, it doesn't sound like now is quite yet the time to really expand the patients that you're seeing. You
Yeah.
have to get in the algorithms. You
Okay.
have to get in the care algorithms. So if a dizziness patient comes in on a dizziness pathway, where is PT on that pathway?
Right
If it's
now.
in the EPIC pathway, you're going to get consulted. If it's not, it depends on the provider.
Oh, okay. So I know what you're talking about because anytime neuro patients come in, I get a consult like that. I mean, they could be stroking right now and
Yep.
they come in and I have a consult.
Yep.
So I see what you're saying. Okay.
Also, you want to be part of the physician onboarding process. So
Yeah.
every physician onboarding, there's a module, there's an orientation, there's a something. You want to have a PT chunk in that. This is what PT does. This is how you consult them. This is when you consult them. This is when you consult them. And that should be provided in training for all new residents and new attendings to help. And that will help with the culture shift.
Oh, that's so good. I do that so I do all in services for all the nurses that on board and transporters, and I do annual like body mechanics, and I just do a lot of teaching of my role. But that's what. But a module is great. That is good because
And I would
do that.
highly recommend that that goes to some of the inpatient teams as well. Because if neuro's thinking about admitting a patient, but they don't really want to, they might be like, hey, have the PT see the patient first. Because this could be followed up by outpatient. And kind of think about that with each team. So we have a lot of teams now that are like, has the PT seen the patient?
Yep. That's yes.
Because from a medical perspective, it doesn't feel like we have to admit this patient. But if the patient's not safe to leave, then we will. So shifting the culture from the top down, and top meaning up higher in the hospital, not like hierarchy, but so that those ED providers also get that, like, it's part of that consult to inpatient as well. So like with a lot of our geriatrics patients, like our elderly care team will be like, hey, like maybe have the PT see the patient because this is something they could do at home, this treatment plan. And so getting that will help as well. But I think until you solve your problem of not having enough staff resources, you may not want to grow.
Right, because I'll go crazy.
And then also just like total shameless plug, if you don't have a copy of the book that I wrote, then I would look in there for the business case stuff.
I got it. I have it highlighted. I have it bulleted.
Because it's in there. Like that's how to do the business case is there. And I think you're right there. Like that's right where you should be.
Yep.
It's time. It's time to do the SWOT analysis. It's time to do the data review. It's time to find your collaborators and like pitch that and get that pilot going, because a pilot with data is the best way to get you the support that you need.
And I think what I'm going to do, because you know, when you have students, they always have to work something for the hospital. Maybe I can have them help me with that. That's what I'll do.
100%. They can be the ones that are tracking those MRNs. I want you to pick 2 inpatients today and follow them till they discharge. How many days till they discharged? How many days till they saw a physical therapist? How many days until their discharge plan was realized? Did they have a fall while they were here? Did somebody chart delirium? If you use the AMPAC, what was their AMPAC in the ED? Did anybody chart their AMPAC in the ED?
I think we're the only ones that do the AMPAC is rehab.
All of our nursing staff in the hospital has to chart AMPAC.
Oh, really?
That also helps us triage.
Yeah,
if your AMPAC's 24.
I think I'm pretty sure we're the only ones that do the AMPAC, but we have an early mobility program that was developed. It's not really in the ED. I don't know how the nurses have time to do it. I want them to do it. It'd be nice for them to do it, but I feel bad asking them to do anything. So I'm very like, I know you're busy. I know you're busy, but if you could, and I'll have them walk a patient. And that's part of my in-service. If you can walk them and if they're safe, and then I have to, they're what they say is independent and what I say is independent are 2 different independents. So then I try to do a little education of, well, if they're holding on to stuff, they need to see me, you know.
You can also talk to them about the stops walking while talking test.
Yes, that's true.
Because that's an easy one for anybody to do. If that person is putting on the brakes, if you ask them a question while they're walking, that's a red flag.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Can they find their way back to the room? Do they
Yeah. Oh,
remember what
yes.
your name was?
Yeah.
Can they pick something up for you?
Yeah.
Just little things so that they're like, oh, or is their gait speed making
So-
you impatient?
Yeah. Well, that's, yeah.
I will not give them any numbers, but I'll say, did their gait speed make you want to pull your hair out? If the answer is yes, that's not a functional gait speed,
Yeah.
because
That's-
nurses are some of the most patient people on the planet.
Yes. They are.
And I'll see like the paramedics from the front walking patients back to rooms, and they're like 30 feet ahead of the patient, and then they turn around and they're like, oh, like they're not walking very fast. And I think that one I need to see that one, I need to see that one, you know, and then kind of follow, like, where did that person end up? Because I can tell from their gait speed alone
Mhm.
that they need an evaluation.
Yeah.
So kind of throwing that out there too, I think, is helpful.
Yeah. That's good.
Teaching everybody to do an outcome measure is going to require a system-wide level of change. Talking to people about their patience level while people are ambulating is more of a thing that'll probably catch on a little bit more easily.
It definitely will. That is a good one. Okay. Good tips. Thank you.
Jen, I'm going to email you too, because I think you need to be on the podcast.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you've got 20 years of experience this year and lots of lessons learned, it sounds like to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything else I can help with, Brooke? Anything you want to know while you've got a captive group of PTs?
I've been taking notes as we've been going. No, this is super helpful. I used to work in the emergency department as a scribe for a couple years before starting PT school. So it's interesting to hear different PT setups as well. Because the hospital I worked at was very small. I think we only had like 25, 30 beds in the ED. And we were primarily like a cardiac center. So we get people like all cardiac arrest, any heart thing, they would come in and we immediately like send them to cath lab. And we didn't have any PTs. We would have like as needed consults, but it was very few and far between. So it's interesting to hear like 3 full-time PTs during the week and a full-time OT. That's like make my student PT heart like smile. It's so cool.
I think OT in the ED is one of the most undervalued and underutilized resources there is.
Agreed.
That's my soapbox that I'll leave you with for today.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys all coming. We'll probably do Q4 journal club. If you have any things you'd really like to discuss, please let me know. And I think that's it. We're going to have, just all of the like things to tell you. We're going to have a in-person vestibular course in January in probably Colorado Springs. If you want to come skiing, it'll be a Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. Maybe you'll get to meet the ED PT up there in the mountains if you're not careful. So, and then also with Helena Esmond of Vestibular First, we're going to have a vestibular webinar online just specifically for ED PTs. And then the one-day in-person course will be kind of a follow-up to that. And we are going to have a lot of new webinars coming out at the end of the year as well. And hopefully next year, an orthopedics course for acute care therapists that are trying to transition to the ED that don't have that, that orthopedic skill set needs a little dust off. So we'll have that, and it'll be more specific to strategies you'd use in the ED. Obviously, we're not going to talk about exercise progression. We're not going to talk about how to do every special test or how to set somebody up with a TheraBand cold laser while you're on squat rack. Like, that's not going to be the thing. We're not doing blood flow restriction therapy. We're going to just talk about the most effective orthopedic assessment and how to use those familiar tools in unfamiliar ways with a vulnerable patient population. So that is coming soon as well. And I think that's it.
Thank you so much. This was so helpful.
Good. I'm glad. I hope you guys have a great night, and we'll see you in a couple months.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.